Thanks very much for joining us. Well, today was a public holiday to ensure that residents of this country and citizens head out and plant trees, a very, very important move in the fight against climate change. And with me in studio, I will be delving deeper into this matter. I've got a guest with me, John Kioli. He is the chair of the Kenya Climate Change Working Group. We will be talking more on that issue. But first, President William Ruto, in his one government service delivery approach, sent out his entire cabinet across the country for today's tree planting exercise. Now, some of the cabinet secretaries had to cover more than 2 counties, spanning hundreds of kilometers between them, whether by use of road or air transport. Critics have projected that the government might have spent money more than is reasonable for this tree planting mission. NTV Sydney Chazima interrogates.
It began with this poster detailing the itineraries of President William Ruto's cabinet secretaries for the National Tree Planting Day. Basing on the venues assigned to each cabinet secretary, questions have been raised over the expenditure of the executive for this tree planting initiative. For a government that has been repeatedly vocal about taking austerity measures, and President Ruto dropping the Kenyans tighten your belts hook during his State of the Nation address, this chorus of taking austerity measures is no longer music to the ears of Kenyans, and perhaps not a reality so far. In this video, Interior CS Kithure Kindiki is seen disembarking from a chopper in Garissa. The chopper, from its registration number 5YGYM, is owned by a private helicopter charter company called Lady Lorry. The kilometers covered by Kindiki approximately are 1,823. The areas covered are Mandera, Wajir, Garissa, and Marsabit. The cost of hiring a helicopter is variable depending on the company. Conservative estimates of hiring a helicopter for an hour range between 150,000 and 200,000 Kenya shillings. The distance from Nairobi to Garissa by road is 366 kilometers. To cover this distance, a chopper only needs 55 minutes, meaning the first hour cost of roughly 200,000 shillings is already spent mid-air. If the CS spent more than 8 hours leading the tree planting drive in the 4 itineraries, the amount spent is roughly 1.6 million shillings. Another CS who covered long distances was Transport CS Murkomen, who was in Homa Bay and Mombasa, a distance of roughly 854 kilometers. If covered by air, it only takes 1 hour 40 minutes. It would, however, take CS Murkomen 14 hours and 11 minutes to cover the 2 areas by road, which within daytime is mathematically impossible, leaving us with the only feasible means of transport being by air. Going by a 6-hour time estimate spent between the 2 locations by CS Murkomen, the total estimate will be 1.2 million shillings. Other CSs who covered vast territories are Soipan Tuya, who covered 638 kilometers, CS Malonza at 549 kilometers, CS Chelugui at 387 kilometers, and CS Miano, who covered 267 kilometers. Critics have sought to know the rationale of not deploying the CSs to their locales only.
Why do they have provincial administration? Because those people can do that job easily. They are commissioners in every county. Why should someone fly from Nairobi to Mombasa, then Mombasa to Homa Bay, then Homa Bay back to Nairobi? With aids and everything else. And it's guzzling is a show cause. So the cabinet is a campaign team. They should convert them to people serving the government.
When you send ministers to different places across the country, it's a good thing. But they are strangers. And in Africa, we believe that strangers come with things. And therefore, they expect to be given. No wonder we are given so many seedlings because a guest came, and because we never value them because we were given for free, they end up dying.
These vast areas, whether covered by road or air, appear to be too costly for the tree planting exercise. The President, Speaker Wetangula, and CS Kuria are on record urging Kenyans to bear with the government as it seeks to stabilize the economy and lower the cost of living. But are the austerity measures a mirage for the Kenya Kwanza government? Sydney Chazima, NTV.
All right, well, as I mentioned, with me in studio is John Kioli. He is the chair of the Kenya Climate Change Working Group. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. Well, a public holiday for planting trees, that caught a lot of Kenyans off guard. Some argued, as you've heard, that the economy simply cannot afford a public holiday, yet it was embraced by many others. Before I find out from you what exactly we achieved today, I'd just like your response and feedback on the story that we've just aired regarding how much was put in to flying these cabinet secretaries across the country.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. How much is the cost of oxygen per hour in Kenyan hospitals? Around 4,500 for an adult, around 3,500 for a child, 1 hour. So you'd ask yourself, the second question is, are we discussing the means or we are discussing the end? And there is, the biggest impact is trees give us oxygen. And this was quite seen during COVID time. As a country, we are depleting so many trees every day. We are spending 80% on biomass energy as a country. We will need trees for a very long time. So for me, I'll steer away from how much was used, but the impact that was made in terms of making a statement from the highest office, all right? Probably the question is again, are we again emitting a lot of emissions while we want to plant the trees again? Because as a country, we need to cut down 32% of our emissions. And this is why we want to plant 15 billion trees by 2032. We need to relook how also we are spending money. We need to relook also how we are emitting more emissions rather than, you know, looking for ways of planting and getting more oxygen. So I think one of the things I look at is the positive part is the impact. Who is saying it? Who is saying plant trees? Who is doing it? I think, first of all, to get that impact from the president himself, from the cabinet is good. How it is being done, that's the other question we want to ask ourselves. Is it good? Can we devolve this thing to the people? Can we ask the people to help us? Because the tradition has been the government, go take the seedlings. But those seedlings are still lying in primary schools. People don't get the value. But the impact is if you tell people, plant your age. All right? I will buy my seedlings. I will look for the place to plant the seedlings. I will do it. I will not ask a coin from the government. We need to relook how the approach is going to be sustainable. Because how many times are these helicopters going to go around the country to plant trees?
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting perspective there. So let's talk about the day itself. In your view, do you have any statistics, and can you share with us perhaps if you know how many seedlings were planted, or if not, what really was the impact? What did Kenya achieve today?
I think the impact, first of all, was projected to be about 500,000, 500 million trees.
Right.
I don't know how they'll verify that, but I feel that from the onset of the rains and the impact of the holiday has brought the sensitization that was needed in the country, that look, we need to do this as a country. This doesn't need to be pushed by the Minister of Environment anymore. We need to adopt it. So I don't know how they will verify it, but there is true impact in terms of the seedlings that were planted. The question is now the growth of the seedlings and the sustainability of that push that the president gave. How are we going to sustain it? So I think that's what we should be asking ourselves, because we have this target of 15 billion by 2032 is quite ambitious. Is quite ambitious.
Do you think it's unrealistic?
I don't think it's unrealistic. You know, the other day, I think 2 years ago, Ghana did a very big tree planting event. And I think the government, I suspect the government is also borrowing from what Ghana did. But their approach was a bit different. It pushed the thing to the people. And the people were already prepared. It was not abrupt. It was something planned. And it bore a lot of fruits. And now it is something that is self-propelling, because it's not just about the holiday, but it is about sustainability, it's about tree growing, right, and the culture of nurturing trees.
Okay, and I really want to delve deeper into that, because there is a huge difference between simply planting a tree, seedling, and growing a tree. But we've got to take a quick break. So when we return, that conversation with John Kioli continues. Stay with us, and we'll be back after this breather. Thanks so much for staying with us. Our conversation continues here in studio with John Kioli. He is the chair of the Kenya Climate Change Working Group. We're talking about the importance of, John, not only planting seedlings, but actually growing trees and nurturing them. Take us through why that is critical in the fight against climate change and in achieving the target of growing 15 billion trees by 2032.
Yes, I think first of all is that the culture in Kenya, unfortunately, was tree planting and not tree growing. And that's why the occasion was more important than the growth of the seedlings. And that's why we are saying, let's do it differently this time. Let's also think about rewarding system. Instead of piling money to seedlings, why can't we also reward people by the seedlings they have grown? This will be better, because millions of money is being used to buy seedlings, and they are dumped in a school, and nobody knows even how to nurture them. Right. And that becomes a cycle of just tree planting and not tree growing. In terms of climate change, we need, as a country, we promise under the UNFCCC, the body that controls issues of climate change that is coming up in Dubai, we promised to cut down 32% of our emissions. We promised that by doing that, we are going to plant an amount of trees so that we can abate the, the carbon emissions that we are emitting every year. Our emissions are not very big, but as a country, we are promised to cut down by 2030.
Are we on the right track? Because whilst we talk about cutting down by growing trees, that's very long term. What do we need to do immediately to cut down our emissions, even though they're not a huge amount?
Yes, we need to invest in renewable energy. Renewable energy has the biggest abatement level following the trees. So if we invite new technologies about renewable energy in sustaining our industries, in our electricity, this will score. Number 3 is also issue of efficiency. Remember, as a country, we are spending 80% on biomass. That means charcoal or firewood. And that will be there for a long time. Let's use efficient GECOs. Let's use efficient ways of even making charcoal, because charcoal will still be done, whatever we do. And if we target to do efficiency, if we target to do renewable energy, if we target also to use land mass for production of methane gas, to use it for cooking, then we'll be on the right trajectory. We have promised to have our nationally determined contribution promise, but we can only pay for 13% of that. So in terms of trajectory, we are still far in terms of attaining what we promised in 2015 in Paris, under the Paris Agreement. But as a country, if we attain little things like in the renewable energy, little things like the tree growing, nurturing, I think we'll be on the right track. In terms of involving people, that's why we are saying, if we take the issue of tree growing to ourselves, we will relieve the government the pressure of every time buying seedlings and telling people, go to the chief to collect seedlings. Right. let's push the culture of plant your age.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it is everybody's responsibility,
Absolutely.
not just the government's. All right, as you talk about the involvement and inclusion of Kenyans, let's get a sense of how people viewed the day and indeed what they did, because Kenyans from different parts of the country have expressed divergent views on the National Tree Planting Day. Let's listen in for a moment and hear what they had to say.
Endelea kupanda, tuhifadhi. Tukihifadhi hiyo miti, mazingira yetu itakuwa mzuri na tutapata yale mahitaji yetu ya kila siku kutoka hiyo miti, kutoka maji, kwenda vyakula, kwenda mbao na bidhaa zingine za miti.
Umeonelea ni vizuri tuje tupande miti. Hata ukiangalia hapa kuna wamama, na mnajua ya kwamba hii shinda ya climate change sana ina affect women, kwa sababu wakati hakuna maji katika homestead, mama ndiye anatembea long distances kwenda kutafuta maji.
Umuhimu wa hii miti ni kushikilia hata mazingira na kuhakikisha kwamba mvua ipotei, na wakati wa kumvua kila wakati kunanyesha.
Siku ya leo wametumia pesa mingi sana ya siku hii ya sikukuu ya kupanda miti. Miti tuwe tukiletewa kila wakati, tuwe tunapanda. Si ati kuwe na sikukuu. Sioni haja ya hiyo sikukuu mimi.
It's not just about the tree planting. It goes beyond the tree planting, because planting a tree is one thing. Nurturing a tree to grow, to become what we want it to be, is another thing.
Hata ikiletwa kesho kutwa, itatupata tunailetwa kwa chief, ndio tutachukulia hapo, tulete vilime prima, tupeleke zile zenye ziko karibu, alafu tunajitolea sisi wenyewe kupanda hiyo miti.
All right, some views there from Kenyans who were clearly involved in the day. So some positive views there. There are, of course, others who simply took advantage of the day and perhaps celebrated not going to work. John, tell us, if we don't take this seriously, what are the consequences? We're already feeling them when we look around at extreme weather conditions for one thing and food insecurity for another. But break it down to us. Why is this critical?
Our tourism sector depends on nature-based tourism destination. Kenya is a nature-based tourism destination. If our ecosystem is destroyed, you will not get people going to Malindi, you will not get people going to Masai Mara, because there's nothing to see. If that tourism sector is depending on that, then there's reason for us to protect it. We know that our agricultural system depends on some type of environment to be able to do tea, to be able to do coffee, and that means that we need to keep our temperatures at a certain degree. Third thing, and very important, is conflict over natural resources. What is happening in Tana River, Kitui, Tana River, is nothing else but conflict over natural resources that are dwindling, natural resources that are no longer there, natural resources that are being needed by the cows, they are needed by the wild animals and the human beings. And that's what is happening also around Mombasa Road, where now elephants are coming to where the people are, or people are going to where the elephants are. And this is also conflict over wild animals and the human attacks. So we need to look at climate change also as a security issue. If not well addressed, then we shall have conflict over natural resources, conflict with people, conflict also over with the wild animals, together with the people, and the country will not be stable. So climate change should not be taken just like an environment issue, but a living issue that needs to be handled very carefully, not just tree planting. Tree planting is one aspect. The other aspects must be looked at in a holistic manner.
John, thank you so much for your invaluable insights on this day. Much appreciated.
Thank you too.
All right, with me, John Kioli, the chair of the Kenya Climate Change Working Group, speaking about the importance of mitigating climate change on this crucial day. You're watching NTV. We have got to take another break, but there is always more on the other side. Don't go far.